beginning, it was a highway no man would dare to travel. Seamanship began as an offshore venture. To lose sight of land was to risk life itself. To journey outside the Mediterranean could mean sailing off the edge of a flat world into oblivion. Among the first to take the chance were Arab dhows that found the year-long cycle of trade winds around the Indian Ocean, and westwards, Viking longships on the transatlantic run to the Vinland of Leif Erikson. Blue water exploration to a plan began only 5 centuries ago. Ships sailed from the Atlantic shore of Portugal in an ordered program with predicted objectives. It was the life's work of Henry the Navigator, Prince of Portugal, whose monument marks the Lisbon waterfront. Within a century, Western Europe had discovered the rest of the globe. Armed with the new science of navigation, drawn from the mathematics and astronomy of the Arabs, the sea captains put out from every European port between the Aegean and the North Sea. As the first stubby caravelles grew into sleek merchantmen, industry began to change and to enrich every nation with access to the Atlantic. The procession of tall ships lengthened into history and dictated the future. Henceforth, Western Europe and North America would be linked to one another and to their distant overseas markets. The pattern was interdependence, and it would multiply 1,000-fold when sail was overtaken by the machine. From 1965 to 1975, this massive trading system doubled twice. Hundreds of ports, thousands of ships of every flag, a non-stop worldwide exchange of millions of tons an hour. Most of the food, energy, and raw materials the 550 million people of the Atlantic Alliance will use each month is always at sea, paid for by the goods and services they supply in return. Today, this great highway is traveled by the biggest ships that have ever sailed. Behind an inch of steel plate floats a second sea, as much oil as an entire convoy of 40 ships was able to carry in World War II. 250,000 tons of oil, enough to keep an entire nation like Belgium going for a full month. Stop this ship, and millions are affected. Stop even a few of the ships that supply the NATO nations year in, year out, and much of life as those countries know it would stop also. Even a pause in deliveries of one commodity like oil can rapidly empty the highways, slow down farms and factories, and bring massive unemployment. And by the same token, the defense forces of Western Europe would rapidly lose their mobility and combat capability. This basic reliance on the ocean can be expressed in graphics. On any one day, 6,000 ships, 3,000 of them loading or unloading in port, and the other 3,000 in between carrying goods, food, raw material, energy, and all of them highly vulnerable. Because freedom of the seas is at once vital and fragile, the nations in NATO have pooled their resources. Air and naval headquarters keep track of all that sails along or around the Great Highway, and in particular, the warships, whoever they are and wherever they may be headed. The international military staff at NATO headquarters in Brussels has always assessed the land and air forces that the Soviet Union keeps in readiness, but now they must also look more closely to sea lines of supply and communication, for the alliance is faced with a new and potent maritime power.
Gentlemen, Soviet naval presence is now global, based on 4 main ports, each the headquarters of a different Red Fleet. From Vladivostok, the Pacific Fleet moves out around Japan, headed into the Pacific, towards the Americas, or through the Sea of Japan, the Yellow Sea and the Indian Ocean, onto the Persian Gulf and Middle East oil fields. In Northern Europe, main bases are Murmansk, and in the Baltic, Leningrad. From Murmansk, the Northern Fleet passes around the North Cape of Norway for the North Sea and the Atlantic. The Baltic Fleet exits through the narrows of the Sound off the coast of Denmark, but both fleets can turn southwest through the Channel, which you may remember today carries 1/3 of all world maritime trade. For the Atlantic, they head west around Scotland or through the Iceland-Greenland Gap. From Odessa, the Soviet Black Sea Fleet transits the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles through Turkish waters into the eastern Mediterranean, where it can patrol the coasts of 3 NATO nations. This fleet can also take a shortcut through the Suez Canal as an alternate route to Gulf oil fields and the Indian Ocean. Westwards, it heads out past Gibraltar to link up with units from Northern Europe. Year by year, the number of these ships increases, and so does their range of action. They can indeed claim to operate on a global scale, and they've done it in a matter of 20 years. So a nation we once thought of only as a land power now operates warships in every category. Indeed, no navy at peace has ever before commissioned so many combat vessels in so short a time. Let's take a look at some of these units, beginning with those we rarely see, meaning the 250 modern long-range submarines, of which 90 nuclear-powered boats were built in 10 years. Many are designed and armed to attack shipping, but half these Soviet subs have clear-cut offensive missile roles, whether strategic or tactical. Like the 9,000-ton Delta-class nuclear subs, one built and launched every 2 months. It carries 12 SSN-8 intercontinental ballistic missiles that from the bottom of the Black Sea can reach New York. Nuclear subs rarely surface, but here's one that did, a Hotel-class missile launcher in distress off the coast of Canada, first observed by Canadian aircraft, picked up later 500 miles west of Ireland by the RAF, finally filmed in northern waters by the Royal Netherlands Navy. Day and night for 35 days, it was shepherded back home by Russian fishing and merchant ships, vessels that, like all their unarmed units, sail under strict Soviet Navy control, many equipped as electronic spy ships. Now for the dozen Cresta-class cruisers, in service, and the first Soviet ships to carry helicopters. This is a Mark II, fitted with 4 launchers on each side for 8 SSN-10 anti-shipping missiles, effective up to 35 miles. Krivac destroyers are still being built at the rate of 2 a year. They are fast gas turbine vessels. The white tubes you see in the bows are 4 more of those SN-10 cruise missiles that can engage ships beyond the horizon. Listed as anti-submarine cruisers are Moskva and Leningrad, the two modern helicopter ships. Their radars suggest aircraft surveillance and command functions, and they work closely with shore-based long-range aircraft. They carry 18 anti-sub helicopters, 5 of them seen here on deck. Moving forwards, this shot pans over fire control radars, surface-to-air missile launchers. You see them there like a capital H. Finally, in the bows, 2 barrel-shaped multiple rocket launchers. Now for an unusual naval get-together. Group refueling at sea under the lee of Moskva. Now over on the right is a Kashin destroyer, another successful class, extremely fast. They're modern gas turbine ships with high acceleration. Soviet surface ships can be replenished anywhere at sea by a force of auxiliaries and oilers like the Desna tanker, here seen refueling Mirka 894. The third strength of the Soviet Navy is a naval air arm of more than 1,000 aircraft. The principal airborne threat to shipping, 400 land-based Badgers with standoff missiles that can sink a merchant ship well over 100 miles away. During a recent NATO exercise, we identified as many as 30 different Badgers overflying the fleet in a single day. The larger Bear aircraft also work with all the Red fleets. Aside from their own nuclear weapons, they can acquire and direct missiles launched from submarines and surface ships. They cover the entire Atlantic, flying from their own bases in Russia, from West Africa, and from Cuba. And finally, the Kiev, the Soviet aircraft carrier, seen here on her first passage through the Bosphorus, en route to the Atlantic via the Med. She and her sister ship, the Minsk, carry 30 vertical takeoff aircraft, Yak-36s, and 25 helicopters. These capital ships are well armed with heavy and medium caliber guns and guided missiles, although the Russians still describe them as anti-submarine cruisers. Whatever you call them, they make a powerful addition to the political impact of Soviet fleets in peacetime and greatly enhance their capability for operations on a worldwide basis. As you probably know, the architect of this remarkable and still growing maritime capability is the Commander-in-Chief of the Soviet Navy, Admiral Sergei Gorshkov, responsible for the whole build-up of Russian naval power over the past 20 years.